We'll get started here.
So this is 221 business stats. So if that's not the course you're supposed to be in, you can leave now. I've had that happen before. I'm Professor Lannis. I've been here for, this is my 7th year. So I've taught business stats every semester. So I think I'm kind of ironed out, most of the wrinkles at this point. So one thing you'll kind of notice down here is I am going to record the lectures. I'm not going to try to make them real nice and kind of as pretty or have everything contained in them. But it's just another resource where you'll basically have the screen grab. You can have the audio of me in the background talking through kind of what we do. But you might miss some of the board work if you decide not to come to class and to watch those. And you'll see there's some other reasons you should show up to the class as well. But those will be posted on a YouTube page, which I'll kind of show you and dive into a little bit more in a little bit. But that's why I've got this Zoom thing running in the background. I figure it's easy enough for me to let it run as I talk and work through things. And it'll just provide additional resources as we get closer to exams. You can go back, and maybe I could even say, go back to this lecture and try to find this part of it, or even on homework assignments for help. So kind of the class overview, we'll kind of walk through the syllabus today. Full disclosure, I've got some other sections that meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you guys are a little bit different. So to keep you kind of on the same pace, we'll probably go a little bit longer than I usually would today, just so we make sure we kind of keep pace with some of those other sections. Don't worry, I probably won't hold you the whole time. It's the first day. It's not, I'm not that mean. So we'll walk through some real basic stuff first. So this is section 5. We are going to use the Yagya and Kelly book. I'm guessing that's how you say it. It's on its 4th edition. So if you go to the bookstore, they've got the book and everything. Really, my suggestion would be all you need is the access code. We're going to use the Connect and Learn Smart assignments on there. So you really just need the access code to get onto that online platform, and I'll walk through how you register for that in a second. I don't necessarily know the benefit of having a physical copy of the book. When you purchase the access code, it comes with a PDF, an e version of the book. So that would be my suggestion, is buy the code. And then if you really, really want a physical copy of the book, go out and find an older edition that's used. You can probably pay $10 for it, right? We're not going to be doing any problems out of the physical book. It is another resource to have, but I don't teach directly out of it. And so it had a couple of things, even terminology wise, that might be a little bit different, which I tend to, I'll mention along the way. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. Buy the code and then kind of find an older version of the book if you really want one. I think it's on edition 4, so edition 1 or 2 would be fine. Go back that far. They don't change that much. They're just trying to make more money. Right? They changed a handful of things and then said, oh, we have a new edition. So the other things that we're going to be using at the beginning of every week, you can already see up on Canvas. If you look at the Files tab on the left-hand side, that's where we'll be putting most of the materials for this course. I put up week 1 lecture slides, called it something along those lines. I might have week 1 lecture slides for section 5. I'll always get those up on Sunday night before the week starts. It kind of gives me a little bit of flexibility. I'm not locked into one class. We have to end on this specific slide, because if we're not understanding things, I want to spend a little more time on that subject. If we're, things are going pretty quickly without questions, we can kind of move a little bit quicker. So I try to kind of keep this class a little bit fluid so that we're not as kind of rigid, following a real rigid schedule, so we can spend time on things that we don't understand. And then worst case scenario, if I don't get them up Sunday nights, I have too fun of a weekend. They'll be up Monday mornings before we meet in class, right? So we'll have those lectures. I also have the YouTube link up here in the PowerPoint, which I also don't want to fail to mention. I also put up a version of the slides that's PDF. For whatever reason, some people have problems with, I think it's Google Chromebooks have problems opening my PowerPoint sometimes. I don't know if I have a too old or too new of an edition. So if it doesn't open up correctly, like it says like no image shown or something, the PDF will always open up okay, and you'll be able to see everything. So this YouTube playlist, well, I've already mentioned I'm recording the classes, but I'll also do some things like, where is the bullet point on? I'll do these pre-class videos. Okay? So the way that these are going to work, and I'll mention in a second, we are going to use iClickers in this class. So if I do a pre-class video, it's only going to be I think I might have in the syllabus 5 to 10 minutes long, but I'm going to try to keep them about 5 minutes. And it'll basically be introducing a concept that we're going to cover in the next class. So if I was to do one, I'm not, but if I was to say, I'm posting one of these pre-class videos today, I would expect that you watch it before Thursday's class. Like I said, they're only 5 minutes long, shouldn't be anything crazy. It's a way for me to help kind of prime you for the concepts we're going to go over. Also get some of the easy stuff out of the way so we can use class time to really address the more difficult stuff and things that I would expect you guys have more questions on, right? And what I'll do, a little bit of an incentive is potentially if I was to post one today and you're supposed to look at it before Thursday's class, I'd probably start Thursday's class out with a couple eye-clicker questions that are related to that video. Now, they're not meant to be difficult. They may be what was the video topic, right? I just want you to get on something that proves that you went to YouTube and at least try to kind of click on the video and watch the video. I'm not expecting you to be experts about whatever you watch. It's just a way for me to kind of preserve some of our class time to make it a little bit more efficient, really. Oh, and along the way, so once we get closer to exams, I'll probably post me working through a bunch of practice problems, just so you, I mean, we'll do like some in class before an exam, but I just want to give you as many resources as possible. I might even put up some additional recordings that kind of go over a topic if I think that some people are having a difficult time understanding it. It's really just a place where I'm going to put up some videos that are meant to be helpful additional resources, right? That's one thing kind of the last year and a half recording so much stuff, what I realize is it's really valuable to be in the class, but it's also beneficial sometimes to be able to look back, right? And so that's why I'm recording these and kind of posting these additional videos so that you can kind of go back where some things are a little bit more succinct. So you can click on that link and it should take you right there. But throughout the semester, this is how I do it. I think the easiest way. So if you go to YouTube, search Professor Lantis, I should be the first one that comes up. You can even see kind of my newer videos. I should be the first kind of channel here. Okay. I should probably put like a little picture or something. Maybe I'll get on that and try to get a picture of me up there. So it's a little bit more identifiable. But right now I've got no competition for that channel. So if you go then click on the channel and look at the playlists, here you're going to see a bunch of them that won't appear to you. These are all listed, these are all my old courses. When you click on this, it should just show these three right here. You'll end up showing a fourth one eventually. I put a video up under our section, so ECON 221, section 5. I'm going to end up replacing that video with the one that I'm recording right now, but if I didn't have anything up there, the playlist doesn't appear. So I want to be able to, make sure you can see that there are those playlists for this sections up there, and that's where you can find all these videos. Okay, any questions for me before we keep moving? Oop. No. So I've got some dates up here, days we won't be meeting in class, some add drop withdrawal dates, but also kind of tentative dates for the exam. So these will be the dates, and I think that I have these days wrong because we don't meet Friday. So these should be whatever the Thursdays are of that week. So Thursday, September 24th or 5th. But those will be the tentative dates for the exam. I'll never make them earlier. If we get closer to that exam date and I'm like, oh, we could use one more class to kind of review things, I might push them like forward a day, like move them up one class period, but I'll never make them earlier. But probably with 90% certainty, I can say those will probably be kind of the dates there, except for there'll be those Thursdays of that week. And I'll update those slides at least say Thursday, the class in which week as well. And then we're locked in for the final exam time as well. So as we get closer to these, if you know you're going to have any type of conflict, it's always best, whether it's exams, homeworks, anything, let me know in advance. If you let me know the day after the exam, oh, I couldn't make it. Okay, what am I supposed, how can I help you now? I mean, it's a lot more difficult for me to help you if you let me know after the fact. So always come to me early. Had a lot of, at this point, I've had too many situations to mention, but we've always kind of been able to figure something out and figure something that will work. Okay. So what do you guys probably care about the most getting out of the way today? So how are you going to be grading this class? Right? The first thing I'll show you, exams are 60% of the grade, which may seem daunting. Anytime you see a high percent of the grade coming in from exams, it was always, panic for me. But one thing that I'll do with these exams, so we'll have those two midterms in the final. Okay. Basically, whatever your best exam grade is going to count. It will be weighted by 30% of your overall grade in the class. Your second best exam only counts for 20%, and your worst exam is only 10, right? So basically what this allows for you to do is if you don't do very well or kind of bomb an exam, well, it doesn't kind of have near as much weight over your overall, towards your overall grade as the exams that you did well on, right? This also allows you to kind of, well, if you have a wake-up call on exam 1, put a lot more effort in and really boost your grade up on exams 2 and 3, right? It also means if you front load your effort in this course, you do really well in the first 2 exams, come finals week, you've got a bunch of different finals, you don't have to worry near as much about this one as maybe you would have if you didn't do well in those first 2. Okay. Any questions on that? Is that clear? Okay. So the homeworks, right? That's kind of the next category. We'll have 3 different types of homeworks. They count for a total of 30%. So 3 different types. Each type counts for 10% of your overall grade, adding up to 30. Right? So the first ones that we're going to have are these Learn Smarts, right? So that's part of this online homework platform. I will show you right now. If we go to our this is not the right class, so that would help. All right, we go to our class under assignments, which should be set as the home page. These 2 assignments are already showing up, right? So these are the Learn Smart assignments. Really, these are another tool I'm using to kind of prime you for what we're going to talk about, kind of an upcoming concept. So we haven't covered these yet, these chapters, but I want you to read them what I have it set before next Monday, basically before class. So these Learn Smarts, the due dates, the due time will always be when class starts at 4 p.m. Right? So before Monday's class, your first kind of homework assignment is to get registered for this McGraw-Hill Connect platform, which also has these Learn Smarts, and then complete these first 2. All the Learn Smarts are, how many of you have had these for other courses? Decent amount, right? You're asked questions. You don't even have to be that engaged if we're going to be real honest, but it's a way for me to know that you at least have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. You've seen some things. It might allow you to identify, okay, I really need to pay attention when he starts going over this, or like, this is going to be a tough week. I really need to make sure like I wake up, well, 4 o'clock class. Hopefully we're not trying to have a hard time waking up, but hard time, make sure you get to class because this is going to be some hard material this week. So those are the first 2. Total time, if you do both of these, shouldn't be any more than 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. I kept them pretty short. This is more so get on, experience with those Learn Smarts for the first time, and also to get you registered, okay? Also with registration, so under the Files tab, you can kind of see here's our slides for the week. I guess I didn't drop and drag the PDF. I'll make sure I do that before next class. So you can have those and have them pulled open as we're going through them in class if you want. The syllabus is there, and then there's this Connect registration help file. If it opens up, there we go. So it kind of has some screenshots to kind of help you kind of register for this if you haven't done it before. If you can register for Spotify or Netflix, I'm sure you can figure this out. It's pretty, kind of prompts you. It's pretty self-explanatory. But just in case there's that there, if you still end up running into a problem, feel free to reach out to me. One thing I will mention when you're signing up for this that I don't think it really says in the help file is it helps you out a lot. And I've talked with them, they say it doesn't, but I'm convinced it does. If you use your Ball State email address, that would be preferred, because I've had issues in the past where the grades don't sync up for certain students. And every time it's been when they haven't used the Ball State email address. They tell me it doesn't matter, but that's the only time I've had issues. So if you use your Ball State email address, you shouldn't run into any of those problems. Now, none of the data gets lost or anything. I can just do it manually. You just don't get to see your grade as quick, and it's a little bit of a hassle for both of us. So try to use your Ball State email address when you're registering that. Oh, I mentioned iClickers, and before I go back to the slides, when I mentioned registering your iClicker, there's a little tab down here. You would just click on that to do that as well. And I think probably the easiest way to kind of just get started into registering for that Connect homework platform is when you're on assignments. If you just click on one of these assignments that are already up there, and sometimes it'll automatically launch. Let's see, there we go. I can launch it over here. It automatically sends me to that assignment and to the correct section and the correct course, right? So usually it won't show you this, it'll show you the registration prompts, and then you'll kind of eventually get to this assignment. But that's another easy way of getting there. Okay. Any questions on those? And they're just graded for completion. you get the questions wrong on it, it doesn't count against you. I think they might ask you a couple more questions if you get it wrong, but basically once you get through it, you get 100% as long as you get on to do it, right? So this is where I usually go on my rant about your production in class, your grade that you end up getting, anything in life really, whether it's how many sales do you make this month or whatever your job is. It's really a combination of two things, right? Ability and effort. Right? So if you don't have that high of ability, you can surpass other people if you put a lot of effort. So your grade here, this is purely effort. It takes no ability, right? As long as you can click on, I mean, I guess it takes some level of base ability, like a fifth grade level of being able to click on things on a computer and go hit next. But really, this is purely effort, right? So I'm created these assignments and I'm using them not only to help you kind of prime your mind for what we're going to talk about, but also a good way for you to boost your grade by simply putting effort into the class, right? Just making sure you get those done before the due dates. Okay? We're also going to do connect assignments on that platform. Those are going to be actual problems you have to work through. And I would say they're probably even a little bit more difficult than the questions I'll end up asking you on the exam. That's because you're going to have bare minimum from when I assign it to when it's due will be 2 weeks. Right, so you have a pretty good chunk of time to work on these problems. I'd say the number of questions range from probably the average number would be about 15. So somewhere between like 12, and I don't think I've ever had one as big as 20, but that's as high as if I ever got 20 questions, I'd probably pull a few off and have it be like 18 or something like that. So they're pretty tough, they're tougher questions, and they are graded for whether or not you get them correct. But I allow the check my work tool that they incorporate here, which basically you can put an answer in, check to see if it's right. If it tells you it's wrong, you can try again. Now, the reason why it's a little more, I can do that in this class and not others is it's not like you can go through 0.01. Oh, that's not wrong, 0.02. So you're not just gonna be able to guess, right? Because there's an infinite number of numbers you could technically actually put in. So these will be a little bit hard in the exams, and don't kind of procrastinate too much and put those off a couple hours before they're due, because it might be you might run into some problems in some of the questions. The Excel projects I'll go over. I have a separate slide. I'll go over those a little bit more. I'll talk about those in just a second. But each one of these categories, Connect, Excel, Learn Smarts, each worth 10%. At the end of the semester, I'll drop your lowest of each type. So there'll be about 7 Learn Smart assignments. There'll be 5 Connect assignments, maybe 6, and then there'll be 5 Excel assignments for sure. Okay. So at the end of the semester, your lowest of each type will get dropped. Right. Now that doesn't mean like don't do one, because if you don't do one, it's a 0. Well, it'll be my lowest one. It'll get dropped because that really puts you in a bind as we get towards the end of the semester. I've seen it kind of backfire on a lot of people. So try, make an attempt at each one of these assignments, even if you procrastinate. Turn something in, like a 50, a 30 is a hell of a lot better than a 0, right? A 0 can really, really hurt your grade a lot, right? So turn something in, do what you can. Always feel like you can reach out to me on any of these assignments. Well, not really the Learn Smart. I don't think you really need to reach out to me for those, but the other two, as you're working on them, try to work on them early so you can come to me with questions. If there's something you leave today with, the number one thing I would hope I'm going to convey today is that I'm pretty accessible. From what I've been told, I'm probably a little more accessible than some of the other professors, right? I want you guys to do well. I enjoy kind of helping people work through things. Usually if you come to my office and you need help on homework, you end up having to talk with me about something else, right? So I just like to talk in general. Yeah, always reach out for any of these homework types or homework categories that you have problems with, or as you're studying for exams as well. I forgot to change this name. They're not online quizzes. This is actually going to be where we do quizzes in class using the iClickers, right? So I'll re-upload these files and I'll change the title here. If we, for some reason, I can't predict the future. If we, for some reason, go remote at any point in this semester, basically I will, instead of using iClickers, use a very similar type of questions, but do it through Canvas with online quiz. I don't expect that to happen. I don't have any inside information, but at this point, I'm planning for anything to happen this semester because I don't know what decisions are going to be made. So for right now, we're going to do these in class using iClickers. So that means how many of you have had iClickers for other classes? Decent amount. So you can use those if they're already registered. It should be fine, but double check. get on Canvas and try to register them. You can use the Reef app, which you can download on your phone. I've had people that use that in the past, and I have it enabled, so you can use either one of those. The way that these are going to work, so it's going to be 10% of your grade. This is another one that should really reflect your effort to get to class and pay a little bit of attention, right? So let's say I had 3 icebreaker questions. There'd be 10 points total for the day. I would give you 7 out of 10 base points just for showing up and answering the questions. For every question you get right, you get a point. So if you get them all right, you get 10 for 10 of the day. If you get them all wrong, you still get 7 out of 10. So the effort of just showing up is going to get you a pretty good chunk of point. I mean, most people, as long as they come to class, are going to get above 90% in this category because I'm pretty helpful at answering some of these as well. I might gesture at certain things. I might make some statements that if you were paying any attention to what we had just worked on, you could probably get the icebreaker question correct. So typically how we'll do these, and I'll show you some sample ones, probably not today, probably next class, where we'll cover some type of problem. We'll work through it together, and then I'll kind of give you an icebreaker question, very similar, but different numbers, different data set. So you'll always see how it's worked through before you attempt it. These, I know some people don't like them or think they're kind of just a way to get people to class, which is that's part of the reason I use them. But the other part is it gives me a lot of feedback into what you guys aren't understanding or what you are, right? And it allows me to kind of adjust how I'm going to teach the next couple classes based off of the responses that I see. Okay. Any questions over anything before we keep moving? Good. So here's just some steps. I told you the file's up there on Canvas already, but I've got it here in the slides as well. A little bit more about those Excel assignments. So there will be 5 of them. I always work through an example that looks very similar to the Excel assignment in class. And when I do that, when I'm recording these, I'll also just pull out the portion where we worked on in Excel, create a separate video so it's like self-contained. So you'll always be able to go back to that YouTube page and find the Excel examples that we worked through in class that look very similar to what the homework assignments will be. Now, obviously, different data set, slightly different things, but really, really closely related. Very good templates for how to approach those homework assignments. You probably will hate these. I know a lot of people do, but I know that I'm doing you a disservice if I don't at least try to give you some understanding of how to work with data, even if it's a very basic program like Excel. I've had students who, as part of their internship application and part of their job application, have been given Excel projects by the companies that they have to work on for like a week and send back. And if you ever get those, feel free to reach back out to me. I've helped a couple people with some of them. But it's something I see being used by companies out there. If not, once you get there, I mean, it's always good to stand out in a resume that you have some understanding of Excel. But even in your upper level courses here, some of them should probably start requiring you to use SAS or Stata or some of these other data program packages. And companies might just want to say, okay, they understood how to work with data in Excel. We can teach them this other program that's pretty much does the same thing, just a little bit different. Also, as always, I know that these can be tough. Sometimes you can get stuck. Don't stare at the screen for an hour and then step away from it. If you're getting hung up on something with these Excel assignments, it's very easy to do that, especially early on, because just small little errors can make it look like nothing's working. Even though, like, conceptually, you've got 99% of the puzzle there, you're just making this 1% error. It really isn't that big of a deal, but it's preventing you from kind of moving on to the next step. So if you ever get stuck, reach out to me. Always can shoot me an email. Set up a time if my office hours don't work, which I don't think I've shown you yet, but I'll show you what those times are here in just a second. So how do you pass this class? Come to class, pay attention. That should be self-explanatory. You get those easy eye-clicker base points, and then the points for the ones you get correct. Also, just there is a pretty strong correlation to attendance and grades from all the data that I have. Watch those pre-class videos. Make sure you get the easy points from the Learn Smart, just so you're primed for class. I think both these tools make it so that the lecture is a lot more efficient in actually progressing your understanding of the concepts, like in the class period. Do the homework, do all of it. Like I said, even if you procrastinate, turn something in. I've given like 10% to an assignment. It's still better than 0. And hell, sometimes when I give away that 10%, they didn't really do a whole lot, right? If you turn something in, I can give you some points, right? So the Excels, I'll grade those, and I always give partial credit for those. So turn something. Miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? The great Michael Scott. So I'll use memes and mention things throughout this class, specifically movies or shows you should watch. And then, most importantly, I always feel like you can ask for help. So my office hours will be Mondays and Wednesdays before class from 2:30 to 3:30. And then Tuesday, Thursdays, 11 to 1. So I will always guarantee I'll be in my office, or at the very least talking to someone down the hall and be able to see you if you stop by during those hours. Otherwise, I'll be here most Tuesday, Thursdays, and my schedules are pretty flexible those days. So if those times don't work for you, shoot me an email. We can find a time that does. Okay. I also have a GA for this course. I don't know. I think I'm supposed to get his office hours by the end of the week, but I haven't gotten those yet. Once I do, I'll re-upload the syllabus. I think right now it just says TBA next to what his office hours are. He was an old student of mine. I believe he's enrolled in, I don't know if it's the MBA program, some type of, or it might be the accounting program here. But he's real knowledgeable. He did well in class. I think he'll be able to help you as well. If for some reason you don't like me or don't want to talk to me. Okay. All right. So help me help you. I'm also 0 for 2 on sections that no one recognized what movie this is from. Can I get one person? Jerry Maguire. Another movie you guys should all watch. The fact that not many people get that reference now is somewhat sad to me. So that's kind of an overview, like just a quick run through what the structure of this class is going to look like, how you're going to be graded, the materials we're going to use. We'll dive a little bit into some basic material, kind of get us set up for what we're going to be looking at here this semester. But before I do that, any questions over anything I've said or anything I haven't said? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. Do you mean Wednesdays when you say like our next class during the week?
The example I gave to you, sorry. Yeah, so when I said it was on Thursdays, right? I'm mixed up because we're not really supposed to have, I've never had a Monday, Wednesday. I've only ever had Tuesday, Thursday. So yes, when I was saying Thursday, I meant Wednesday. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you said we had like 7 points if we show up.
Mhm.
And then you said, so basically to get the 3 points, you said if there's like 10 questions, you only have to get 3 right. out of
Well,
10.
no. So I'll give you another example. So that example, I said we'd have 3 questions, right? So the base points were 7. If I gave you 5 questions that day, the base points are only 5. Then each question is worth 1 point.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not going to be asking you a question every minute. I'm going to usually it's going to be 2 or 3 questions max. Some days it'll only be 1 question, which means if you show up that day, you would get how many base points? Yeah. So, yep. Any other questions? These are good. I don't like talking for too long.
Really, just out of curiosity, why is it Monday, Wednesday, not Tuesday, Thursday?
I couldn't tell you. I think they were trying to be nice to me because all my other courses are Monday, Wednesday, but they're earlier in the day. So I'm here in the afternoon working on stuff on Monday, Wednesday before we meet. So I don't know why they did that, but they did. So here we are. Any other questions? I had the same question. So. Okay, so I put up, this is a business statistics course. So the way I always describe this is if we were over there in the math department and we were taking a stats course, they're going to be way more rigorous about the theory and the mathematics. I'm way more concerned that we understand not how do we get from point A to point B, but once we get to point B, how do we use the statistics that we've calculated to make educated and more optimal decisions, right? So we're going to be looking at a lot of different data sets. Some of them will be kind of business related, like some marketing stuff or finance. But a lot of it's just going to be data sets that might even apply to everyday life. But if we know how to calculate statistics and interpret them for one data set, we can do it for any data set we really want to. So I'll try to use as many different examples as I can to try to create or try to keep it interesting and kind of not lose anyone if I used to always use finance examples, right? So here's a couple of them. Like we've got labor statistics, some kind of county level economic data, finance data sets. They've even got a survey that they started in 1979 all the way to today, where they ask people like what their income was, if they took college courses, their alcohol and drug use, like a million different things. So we'll have some kind of interesting data sets that we'll look at. But really my end goal in this class, I'd like you to be able to apply kind of the different statistics that we're able to calculate and be able to interpret them and apply them to real world situations, which to me allows us to really identify kind of people who are trying to bullshit us, right? So a lot of people can use statistics to lie, right? If you don't really understand what that statistic means and they make an inference from it, well, you can't tell them they're wrong because you don't even understand what the statistic is telling you, right? So once we talk about things like variance or confidence intervals, it gives us a lot of power to be able to basically tell people that they're lying to us or what they're saying is wrong. Right? So a couple examples kind of start out, just start to think about some of the things that we're going to be able to go over. So let's say that there's a statistic that California has more teachers than or Arizona. So what state is that? So the inference made is that California cares more about their children's education. That statistic is true, but the inference doesn't make sense. Why? Yeah.
Well, California is a way bigger state than
Yeah.
Arizona, so obviously they're gonna have more teachers.
Yeah, I pray to God they have more teachers, right? They're gonna have way more students, right? If they had this, like, even if they only had 50 more teachers, they really don't care about their kids, right? So, we're using the wrong statistic here, right? So sometimes you'll see people and you're just like, look, if you want to make that inference, you potentially could. You would just need data on something like teachers per student, right? Or teachers per pupil, or however I phrase it here, right? So always think about, is the inference made actually using the correct statistics, right? Are they actually telling us what the person is saying? The other one, I'll try not to use, I think I used 2 sports examples today, but from here on, I try to stay away from. I know not everybody's interested in that. It's just really easy data to grab sometimes. But of the last 10 World Series winners, 6 of them have been small market teams. Small market meaning smaller cities. They can't generate as much revenue, and so they shouldn't be able to afford as high quality players, and we wouldn't expect them to do as well. However, 6 of the last 10 have been won by small market teams, so someone makes the inference that money doesn't buy championships, right? So this is a true stat, but then if you go back, well, why didn't they go back to the 11th year? Because if a small market team had won in the 11th year, well, now I've got 7 out of 11 instead of 6 out of 10. That's a better percentage. So what was probably true about that 11th year? Small market team probably didn't win, and then they would have had 6 out of 11 instead of 6 out of 10. Maybe if you go back to the 12th year, well, it's 6 out of 12 now. It just keeps getting worse. So anytime that you see data censored, or like, why does it start and end in this time period? Or why do they only include these states or only these industries? There's probably a reason. It's probably because if they didn't, then they would get statistics that don't line up with the story that they want to tell. The third example, which I always love and burn in the first class, is a study found 90% of bar fight deaths. The person who died was the individual who started the fight. Right? So karma is a fill in the blank. But why would you maybe expect that this is actually lower than I would expect? I would think this would be 100%. So if you've got a bar fight, let's assume 2 people to make it easy. 1 person dies. You then say, okay, the only person left is the guy who killed someone, and you ask them who started the fight. I think they're going to tell you that they started the fight. This is alarming to me that 10% of people don't understand that, right? So, you got to think about who are you collecting data from, right? And why might it be bias? Right, anytime. The other example I always use is, we'll talk about bias later on when it comes to like survey and collecting data. But it's like anytime you look at data of like basically anyone like college or high school drug use, it doesn't line up with like the quantities being sold, or like it's vastly underreported, right? Because who's going to like confess these things to you if even the smallest way they think it's going to somehow come back around, right? So we have to think about who we're collecting data from. And then kind of the age-old stats example, we'll get more into this towards the end of the course, but ice cream sales are positively correlated with drowning deaths. So they both tend to be, when one of them is high, so is the other, right? So someone says, okay, ice cream sales are causing people to die, we got to stop selling ice cream. Well, that's obviously lunacy. We know that's not a causal relationship, but those 2 things are definitely positively correlated. But what are we not thinking of?
You probably swim and eat ice cream both in the summer.
Yeah, right. We're leaving out a really important variable or something else that is really causing both of these things to go up, which is higher temperatures, right? When it's warmer out, people are more likely to buy ice cream, and people are more likely to swim, which just leads to a higher number of drowning deaths as well. So hopefully we can start to like see things like this and start to think through them more critically. we'll have more difficult statements and be able to think about why they wouldn't be true as we kind of progress through the concepts. All right. So we'll introduce a couple data sets to you today. We'll kind of talk about some definitional stuff. We won't get anything too crazy, but first thing I'll show you is this data set, which I went out and grabbed just a subset of the Cubs roster data. I like this. Like I said, it was sports data, but don't worry. The whole reason I went out and grabbed this because it doesn't really matter if it's from the Cubs or not, right? You might have no knowledge of baseball, wouldn't have recognized any of these names. And what I've got really are player names, positions, and salaries. This very well could be a company. Could be 10 different employees, what their position at the company was, and then what their salaries are. I just didn't want to make up a bunch of names and a bunch of salaries, right? I just went out and grabbed some actual data. Okay. We're looking at a data set like this. I'm going to start referencing these rows are observations, right? Here, the observations are individuals, right? But these observations could be countries, right? I could have like a list of countries and their GDPs, or I could have a list of companies and kind of what their debt to earning ratios were, whatever other things I'm interested in. So the observations are going to be the rows. And then for each observation, I'm going to collect information on different variables, right? So the first variable I have here is player name. The second variable is position. So all I did was record each observation's position, each observation's salary, right? And I've now got 3 variables: name, position, salary. It's kind of the basics of how we'll think about these data sets. I've got my observations as my rows, and the information I'm collecting on those observations will be my variables, which are the columns. Okay. Any questions on that? Oh, you have a question, you can interrupt me after this, but I put element or observation here. Some of this stuff you do get the book and you're looking at some of the learners, sometimes I'll reference them as elements. I never will. People in the stats department might, but anyone in this College of Business is going to call these observations. It's just two interchangeable terms there. Questions on that? Shouldn't be too tough yet. So we'll talk about a couple different types of data. The first is going to be qualitative. Okay, so qualitative, we've got a textbook definition up here, but the easiest way to think about this is non-numerical values. So any variable that we collect that doesn't have numbers, it's qualitative, right? So examples might be like if I had a used car data set, so a data set with a bunch of used cars and information on them. Maybe I record the color of the car, right? Red, blue, green. That's going to be a qualitative variable. Okay, it's the non-numeric. I then have quantitative variables, which are basically numerical variables in which when we record them, it will have a number associated with it. So for my used car data set, this would be like if I had the mileage of each car, right? It's a numerical value, it's a quantitative variable, right? So I'll try to get out of the way here in a second, just to kind of give a little bit better of a visual. And one thing I might do occasionally, we'll see, I was kind of forced to do it last year, but then I kind of started to like it. I might start using this dot cam a little bit, especially in a room like this, because we don't have a lot of board space. I might start using the dot cam a little bit, and that would even make the kind of recordings a little bit more helpful as well. But for small things like this, I'm just going to use kind of this board. So underneath both these categories, right, 2 different types of variables, non-numbers and numbers, right, qualitative and quantitative. We can break these up a little bit more. So the first one over here for qualitative would be this nominal variable, right? So all a nominal variable is a qualitative variable which has no intrinsic value. Another way to think about this that might be a little bit easier is it's going to be a qualitative variable that doesn't allow you to rank the observations. Okay? So this might be something like hair color, right? If I had a big survey data that collected information on individuals, and one of the things they collected information was hair color. Well, I can't rank people based off their hair color. I can't say, well, all the redhead people are better than blonde-headed people, and whatever. Like, there's no intrinsic value to your hair color, right? So this would be what we would call a nominal variable, right? I can group the observations, like I know that everyone who has black hair has the same hairstyle, but I can't like rank them above or hair color. I can't rank them above any other hair color, right? Another one that we'll often see in a lot of these data sets, and a lot of this survey data kind of opens up a discussion that is probably meant for a non-stats course, but we'll see a lot of things like race or gender often kind of as these nominal variables, right? a much longer discussion, that we could have about how should we actually be classifying this, or what should the responses allowed to be. But in a lot of this survey data, especially the older stuff, we're going to have things like gender kind of be classified as male, female, which is a nominal variable, right? But it has no intrinsic value. It doesn't allow us to rank the observations. Same kind of thing. If you look at the Census Bureau and they collect like, what race are you? Right? They have a limited number of options, right? You could expand that a lot if you really wanted to. Just for the sake of brevity, they sometimes don't include all of them. And so we're just subject to whatever the data set has within it, right? Now, for creating surveys, it's a whole different story, but that's not this class. That'd be like a survey and methods course, which would probably take over in the stats department, I guess. Probably do some of that stuff in marketing, but I don't know if any of you are far enough up to that. So some other examples might be from the other data set we had, the baseball positions, right? They're nominal. I can't really rank the positions just based solely off of kind of what the name of the position is, right? So all these, right, name would be nominal, right? I can't rank the data. So much more useful type of qualitative variable would be ordinal, right? So an ordinal variable, right, is still qualitative. It's still a non-numerical value. It's still a word, but it allows us to rank the observations. So I'll give you an example. At the end of every semester, right, you have a question that shows up on the student evaluations that overall this instructor has been effective, right? Well, I can say once I see all of your responses, I mean, I can't see individually, or I'm not saying that, but if I was to look at like, here's student 1, 2, 3, 4, and what their response was to this question, well, I could rank them because people who said strongly agree, I know think that this professor was better than the ones who only agreed, and they think that they were better than only the ones that said neutral, and so on and so forth, right? So it's still a non-numerical value, but it allows us to rank the observations, right? Other example might be education levels, right? A lot of survey data we look at, we'll see, this individual had a college degree, this person only had a high school degree. Well, I can rank them based off of the response to that variable. Another great one is letter grades. Right? When I submit your grades to the registrar, they don't actually see the percentage. They end up just the letter grade I assign. Right? So if I'm just looking at the letter grades, I can rank people because I know people who got A's did better than A minuses, did better than B plus, so on and so forth. And so these ordinal variables are a little bit more useful, but they're still somewhat constrained because for everyone who got an A, I can't say which A was better, right? I don't know if they had a 94.3 or a 98.9. All I see is A, right? So this letter grade would be a real good example of an ordinal variable. It allows us to rank the observations, but within each response, right? So there's all these different responses we could see for letter grade, right? A minus, B plus, B, all the way down to F. It allows me to rank them somewhat, but within each type of response, so for all the A's or all the B's, I can't actually say like who had a higher A or who had a higher B. All I'm seeing is the letter grade. Okay? So we're still somewhat constrained. We'll do a little bit with qualitative variables here in this week and probably a little bit next week. But then after that, the majority of our time will be spent on quantitative variables, right? Because they give us a lot more power to calculate different statistics and say a lot more interesting and important things. Okay? So the two types of quantitative variables we have, the first is going to be discrete. So I'm just kind of giving you this right. We've got like these two umbrellas, qualitative, quantitative, two types of qualitative variables, and then we'll have two types of quantitative. So a little bit of a sneak peek here. The other one will be continuous, right? So we're going to have discrete and continuous quantitative variables. Right? So the first type of quantitative variable is discrete. And all it means is that there are gaps in between the numerical values that we could see recorded for this variable. So for the sake of this class, we're always, whenever I give you examples, it's going to be discrete if it's only integer values, right? So we can think of some examples. If I asked you how many siblings you have, you could tell me, I think I left off 0, but 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to whatever that crazy TLC family is. But if you tell me 1.5, I got to call the authorities, right? You can't have half of a sibling, right? And so this is a only integer variable in which I can only see integer responses. So that means it's discrete. I can never see any value in between 1 and 2. If I ask you the number of days you do something a week, so the number of days you consume alcohol. Well, as soon as I drink today, hopefully none of you have yet, it's only 4. you've drank 1 day a week, 1 day out of the week, right? So like the only responses I could ever see is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 7. And so it's usually these discrete variables, it's a smaller set of responses that we could see, and they're going to be integer values. Okay? So no decimals might be a good way to think about discrete variables. It means no decimals. You could see in the responses no decimals. So if you think about a nice visual on a number line, right, we can see 1, 5. We can't see 7.3514. Right, we can't see anything in between 7 and 8. Any questions on this before we keep going? I think it's just too wild of an idea. So continuous variables, still quantitative, right? However, it can be any number. The response for this variable can be any number. It could be 3.1245678 9. I just kept listing numbers there, but right, it can be any decimal value. So a lot of examples will think about this. So if we have height or weight, if we had an accurate enough measurement tool, we could take this out to whatever decimal we wanted to. In fact, I'm guessing with water displacement and a little bit of knowledge about physics, we could actually get someone's weight out to whatever decimal point we want. Okay? But maybe a better way to think about these continuous variables is anytime we have a variable that can be recorded with any decimal, right? Think about it as continuous. Okay? The people in the stats department might not like that, and I'll mention why in a second, but anytime you see a variable that we have recorded decimal points on, think about that as a continuous variable. Okay? The reason why I say that and make that distinction is because I could also tell you that income is continuous. That you could push back a little bit on that. So we know about discrete value or discrete variables. I told you that for this class, it'll only be ones where we can see integer responses. But it could be anything where we have gaps in between the values we could record. So if I told you that income was actually discrete, or what would the argument be why income is actually discrete and not continuous? Yeah. Right? Our denomination of money only goes down to that second decimal. So there are gaps. I could never see 0.3142, right, as your salary. Right? So, we wanted to go by letter of the law. This isn't theoretically a truly continuous variable, but it goes out to the second decimal. We have such a wide range of values that the theory actually shows that it's such a close approximation that it doesn't matter. So it's just for the sake of this class, anytime it's an integer, anytime we can only see integers, it's discrete. Anytime you see any decimal associated with that variable, think of that as continuous. Yeah. Okay. In a number line, we can see 2, 5, we can see 6.341, right? See any response really. Any questions on the distinction between those two types of variables? So we've got kind of two categories, qualitative, quantitative, each have kind of two different types of variables that we'll deal with. So I think I've already mentioned this, but right, we've got this data set. Salary would be a continuous variable here. I think I dropped off the decimals just to make it easier to see, but we'll think of salary as continuous. So we've kind of talked about the different types of variables. I'll talk a little bit about different types of data sets that we're going to be looking at throughout this semester. So one is going to be cross-sectional, right? So these are like the ones I've already shown you. It's going to be a bunch of different subjects or observations, a bunch of different individuals recorded at one point in time, okay? So this would be something like, I'll change it to, instead of people, we'll use countries. So cross-sectional data would be like if I collected 20 different countries and what their GDPs were in 2010, right? Multiple different subjects collected that data at one point in time. We also have time series, which is when I collect data about one subject across multiple points in time. So this would be like if I collected information on the US, right? For the last 20 years, recorded their unemployment rate, right? So I'd have 20 years of data, went across time, but only one subject, the United States. And then a panel data set would be if I basically throw those two together, right? So I could have multiple subjects at multiple points in time. So I might have 20 different countries, and I might collect data on their GDP for 20 different years. Okay? So I'll show you some other examples and some pictures of what these data sets look like. But that's the different kind of 3 different types of data sets we'll be dealing with. Right? That's not going to make a huge amount of difference for what we're going to do later on in the semester, but for the next week or two, we're going to look at doing some graphing and things like that. And some of the time series and cross-sectional stuff would be a little bit different. questions on that? I don't want to go too fast. So here's a cross-sectional data set where I've got a bunch of different countries, and I've collected information in 2011 on their GDP per capita, their primary and their secondary education expenditures. So I can collect multiple variables, right, within the same year, and that's still cross-sectional, right? Because I'm collecting GDP and these education expenditures in the same time period, right? For these 20 different countries that I've got. A time series data set would be like, well, here's the unemployment rate over this time period for the United States. Panel data is like if I throw those together. So one that an old data set that I have that's kind of fun, and it's formatted a little bit goofy, but at one point I had ISTEP data for 3 years, so 2009 and 2011, for every Indiana student who'd ever taken the ISTEP during those time periods, right? So I've got like multiple subjects, right? Student 1, student 2, student 3, but I've collected data for each one of them at different points in time, 2009, 2011, sorry, 2010, 2011. And I've collected information on their school, their grade, math and reading scores. Right, so this would be an example of a panel data set. I've got multiple subjects, multiple students, and I collected data or information at multiple points in time for each student. You can imagine that there's actually a lot of stuff going on with this that would actually kind of apply to even statistics course. You almost need another stats course to really understand the power of panel data. So we'll primarily kind of use cross-sectional data in this class, but I will show you examples of the other two as well. One thing that we'll eventually dive into, and it's going to make some differences kind of early on when we're calculating things like variances and standard deviations, which we'll have to know what that is yet. But we're going to have population and sample data sets. So a population data set would be, I have every single member of whatever I'm trying to study. So if that is, I want to make a statement about the average GDP in the world, I would need the GDP of every country, right? That would be my population data. If I only had 20 countries' GDPs, that's a sample, right? That's a sample of the, how many countries there are in the world. Maybe I want to make a statement about Ball State students, so I collect information from you guys. Well, you're a sample of the entire population, which would be, I had to collect information on every Ball State student if I wanted a population data set, right? So our population data, I would need everyone that would belong to kind of whatever group I'm trying to make statements about is. And then we have, sample data, which is going to be a subset of that. And really the only time we see true population data, unless we like narrow down our question, like if I'm just interested in specifically Ball State students, it's still going to be tough, but I could potentially get information from every Ball State student. But that's really, I've already narrowed it down to probably, I would want to make statements about every college student, right? And then if I want to know something about every college student across the US, well, now I need recorded data from every college student in the US. It's a lot more, it's not near as feasible, right? So more often than not, we're going to be dealing with sample data. The biggest example we have of population data collection is the census, right? It tries to get information from every person in the US. And even that, there's people that fall through the cracks. So technically, it's not truly population data, but it's as close as we can get is using a census to collect information about every person in the United States. So why do we need sampling? I kind of already mentioned this. This isn't anything wild. It's not going to like have specific questions on this for you, but the idea is, right, it's way too expensive, right? Just to try to collect a lot of data from every single person in the US, that's going to be very expensive. It's also just not practical. So the example I always give of this is like, let's say I was concerned with obesity in the United States. So I go out and I record every single person's weight, right? I mean, by the time I'm done, what might be true about some of the individuals' weights? They've already changed, right? So it's not even practical. I can't even get accurate, like current information if I have to collect data from every single person. But if I can collect data of 1,000 people pretty quick, it gives me a pretty good snapshot of the entire country, right? And we'll talk more about like how big do my samples need to be to make statements about the population, things like that later on. But that is the idea. We're usually not going to have population data, and the best we can get is some subset of the population and just have sample data. And it'll create some problems for us as we move forward. Some other starting definitional terms just to get out of the way. The first thing that we're going to do is work through some descriptive statistics. So these are basically some statistics that we can calculate that inform us about different aspects of the data. Okay. These will be things like the mean and the variance, and we'll go dive deeper into those in the next class. And then statistical inference. This is the idea that we're going to take sample data and make statements about the population, right? We're inferring things about the population, even though we only have sample data, right? So we'll come up with these descriptive statistics for the sample, and then use those statistics to make statements or inferences about the population as a whole. And we'll discuss some of the issues of doing that as we kind of progress this semester as well. Like I said, I'm not going to like quiz you on like definitional stuff. I'm just kind of setting us up as we're moving forward. But I'll give you guys a little bit of time here to kind of jot some of this stuff down. So I'm moving a little quick. I think if there's anything else I want to say here. I think we're good. I've already shown you this. I don't know why I duplicated that slide, but I at one point thought I needed to. So what we're going to start out with, probably on Wednesday, is probably diving into Excel right away. So I'm going to work through a little bit more, probably here another 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll let you get out of here a little bit early. But I'm going to set us up with kind of how we would do this by hand, creating these frequency distributions for qualitative variables, and then we'll take a look at how we do that in Excel on Thursday. So Thursday, this is going to be a problem. Excel on Wednesday, right? So Wednesday, if you want to bring a computer to class, I don't have a problem with that. In fact, when we do things in Excel, I'll put up a blank file. So before class starts on Wednesday, I'll upload a blank Excel file that you can kind of work along with me and kind of do what I'm doing up here. So if you run into problems, you can ask them real time. And I actually suggest that. I think it's really helpful to work along with me. But setting us up for that, let's say I have a data set where I've got what, 9 or 10 people, and I have their letter gradient course. Right? So all a frequency distribution is it counts the number of observations that had specific responses. So for instance, I dropped the pluses and minuses to make this easier. The only 5 responses I can see, right, are A, B, C, D, or F here. Right? So all a frequency distribution is, okay, what's the first response I could see? A. Count the number of observations that had that response, or the number of people who got an A. Then count the number of people who got the second response, which is a B. So I count the number of people who got a B. Basically, I will have each possible response I could see for this qualitative variable, and I'll just count the number of observations for which I saw that response. Right? Is that pretty clear? Any questions on that? So it's easy enough to do by hand if I've got 10 people. But I was doing some work, actually, I'll end up showing you some of the stuff later this semester. But I took every course I've ever taken or ever taught in statistics, and I came up with like a grade distribution. I don't want to go through and count that by hand. Right? I was like, I think it was over 1,000 students already, right? I'm not doing that by hand. So that's why I'm going to show you next class how we do this in Excel, right? As long as we get the concept of how we would do it by hand, Excel, we can start to see how it makes our life a little bit easier. Because we can't deal with a data set of 1,000 people. I mean, that's just wasting time at that point. Right? So we've got our frequency distribution. The next thing we can come up with is our relative frequency distribution. So once we have that frequency distribution, the way we turn it into a relative frequency is simply dividing that frequency by the total number of observations. Think about it this way. If I had a class of 10 people, 3 of them got A's, the frequency is 3. The relative frequency would just be 3 over 10 or 0.3. Right? So all I'm doing is I'm going to go through and divide each frequency by the total number of observations. Right? So I'll show you another example. So we take the category frequency, we divide by the total number of observations. Fairly easy. If I go back to that Cubs roster data, I pulled the full rosters. There's 25 individuals. I can go through every single position and count the frequency. So there's what, 13 pitchers, 2 catchers, 1 shortstop, so on and so forth. To turn these into relative frequencies, all I have to do is what? So my other example, I said there's 3 people with A's in a class of 10. My relative frequency would just be 3 divided by 10. So here, if I wanted the relative frequency for pitchers, I would take that 13, that frequency, and divide it by,
25.
yeah, the total number of observations, which I have calculated down here, right? And then I just go through and do that for every single position, right? I divide every single frequency by 25, and now I've got my relative frequencies. What's the lowest relative frequency I could ever see? 0. Right? What's the highest relative frequency I could ever see? It'd be a very boring data set. 1, right? If every observation was exactly the same for that variable. Now, so it's almost like these relative frequencies, I'm kind of foreshadowing a little bit. They're going to look something that we start calling probabilities, right? Or you know, for now we'll call them relative frequencies, but they're going to reflect probabilities. They're going to range between 0 and 1. If you ever get a relative frequency that's outside of the range of 0 and 1, you know you made a mistake. You hit an extra button on the calculator or something, right? So we've calculated all of our relative frequencies by simply taking the frequency and dividing it by the total number of observations. So this kind of takes, you have to go back to thinking about common denominators here. But what should these relative frequencies add up to? 1. Why?
It's a percentage base. It's a fraction, so your fraction from the entire 25 is just each is a different.
So think about it. We divided every frequency by 25, but the numerators are just the original frequencies, which should add up to that 25, right? The total number of observations. So anytime you add up your relative frequencies, it should always add up to 1. Otherwise, you made a mistake, right? So that's kind of a thing to point out along the way. I think I put down here, except for the Zoom things covering it up. All right, the total should always be 1, right, when you add up those relative frequencies. So I'm going to introduce one more thing. I'll let you get out of here for today. So now that I've got my relative frequencies, I said you can think about these as probabilities, right? So probabilities range between 0 and 1. 1 being like it's 100% certain that this is going to occur. 0 meaning there's a 0% chance. So if instead of dealing with these decimals, just for display purposes, honestly, a lot of the time, we want to convert these relative frequencies into what we'll call percent frequencies. Okay? So if I want to turn these into percentages, any idea how I might do that?
Multiply by 100.
Yeah, right. We'll go back to the grade example. If 3 out of 10 students get A's, my relative frequency is 0.3. How do I turn, and I know 3 out of 10 is 30%. So how would I turn 0.3 into 30 and multiply by 100? So once we have our relative frequencies, we just take that relative frequency, multiply it by 100 to get our percent frequency. Shouldn't be anything wild. We're basically just converting probabilities into percentages. And like I said, to be honest, usually that's just because it's easier to talk in percentages and it's easier to display kind of the percentages like on your y-axis.
So when we're looking at relative frequency in a table, like we're seeing the percentages, are those percentages representing how frequent that, like for pictures, or just how frequent the pictures are?
So we can go back here, right? And if I show you the frequency distribution, it's pretty easy to see like there's a lot more pictures than the other positions, right? But I don't know how much more, like maybe if I'm really good at math in my head, I can figure it out real quick. So we turn them into relative frequencies. Okay, about 0.52 out of the whole of 1. Well, yeah, but that's not how we talk, right? So then I say, okay, I'll convert those to percent frequencies. So now when I convert this to a percent frequency, okay, 52% of the roster is pictures. That's how we talk, right? So it's really just a long, kind of a longer way to get, like, we don't talk in math, we talk in other words sometimes. So that's really why we're getting to percent frequencies, because that's typically how you try to convey the information about the data. That's a good question, though. Any other questions? So I think we'll start out in this class. I'll show you some like examples of like iClicker questions. I won't start using iClickers until next Monday. So it kind of gives you this week to get them registered or download the Reef app. We'll start using iClickers in class on Monday. And then also that those 2 Learn Smart assignments are due Monday before we start class. So we've got a whole week to register your iClicker, a whole week to get on, register for that Connect homework platform, and to finish those first 2 Learn Smart assignments. As I said, shouldn't take more than 15, 20 minutes total. Just kind of go through those. Any other questions for me before I let you guys out of here? All right, we'll see you guys on Wednesday. Not Thursday, Wednesday.
Almost. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I got it.
But hey, thanks for.
Yeah.
So how much of this class will we actually be doing versus how much of it is just?
So, we'll be doing a decent amount of them. There'll be questions along the way that are more about interpretation. And I try to simplify the math component as much as I possibly can. But the first exam will be the most computational, so we'll be doing the most math. And then it kind of progresses the second third of the course a little bit. There's still computational, but it's a little bit more interpreting. And then the last third is really primarily interpreting. So we kind of progress throughout the semester. Now, the nice thing about the earlier stuff, the computation is easier than when we get to towards the end. So I try to not make you do computation math for math's sake, right? But you do need to have some basic understanding. Working through them by hand, I think helps you connect more with what those statistics are actually telling you.
Okay. Is it like mainly calculus or?
No,
No.
I mean, I might mention some things if people are interested about what it would look like using calculus. For the most part, it's going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Alexis and I'm on the field hockey team.
Oh,
So I
okay.
may be missing classes every now and then.
So the way that I'll usually do that, you have those forms.
Yes.
So just try to get me those forms. Reminder. Sorry. I can move my stuff. You?
No, this is for